Hello, and welcome to this special edition of the Accountancy Age Big Question webcast. In this programme, we speak to Paul Boyle, Chief Executive of the Financial Reporting Council, and we hear of his latest efforts to improve audit choice and the audit market in the UK. Paul Boyle, Chief Executive of the FRC, thanks for joining us. The FRC's got a huge programme of work underway. Very important times coming this June as well. But before we get on to that, can you just tell me what are your priorities for the coming year at the regulator?
Well, in our plan and budget, we've set out all of the big issues that we're dealing with. And probably from that list, I'd highlight three that we're in particular concentrating on. Firstly, there are some accounting and auditing issues arising from the credit crunch, which we're still having a look at. We don't think that story's over yet. Secondly, we're going to carry on with our work on the risks arising from concentration in the audit market, which we think are potentially serious. And thirdly, we're very keen to do what we can to make sure that the European Union keeps accounting standards in Europe lined up with the ISB's standards.
Can you just give us a bit of detail about what your focus is around the credit crunch?
Well, obviously, now that all the banks and financial institutions have published their annual accounts, we're starting to go through them in some detail and looking to see whether the disclosures have been appropriate. And we're also starting our work on looking at the work that the auditors did in relation to the audit of those accounts. And in looking at those accounts, is your concern that the numbers are present, or is it a concern very much about the presentation of those numbers? Well, there could be a variety of things. We're certainly keen to look at the way in which people have put their numbers together, the way in which they've disclosed the risks, disclosed the detail of the financial instruments that they've entered into, and the financial commitments they've made. It's too early to say what the outcome of that examination may be, but in general, when you take a look at issues like this, what's the likely outcome? You make some recommendations down the line? Certainly, and we will eventually publicise a summary of what we've found. Obviously, one of the keys to the work of our Financial Reporting Review Panel is that the work's done on a confidential basis until we reach a point of saying that the company really ought to make some additional disclosures. So there's a limit to what I can say at this stage. Okay. And the examination of the banks, is that prompted by just a general concern about reporting within the credit crunch, or do you have specific leads about reporting issues among the banks? Well, you may remember that towards the end of 2007 we set out what our priority sectors would be for our reviews in the current year, and obviously we highlighted banks as being one of the leading sectors. And you know, it's widely reported that some banks have encountered more difficulties than might have been expected. But you know, we're open to all sorts of information on where we should look, and if anyone's got any suggestions of things they want us to look at, we'd be delighted to hear from them. Okay. You're also working on audit competition. There's been a lot of work done on that already so far. What are the next steps for the FRC? Well, just a week or so ago we published the latest progress report, and that included a consultation on the issues arising from possible changes in the ownership rules relating to audit firms. And we know that within a few weeks the European Union will publish a discussion paper on that topic. So it will be interesting to see how the debate develops. Is it your view that the firms are in need of a drastic change to the ownership rules? Well, I think there's a case there to be looked at. One of the issues that I think everyone would like to see is more effective competition and choice at the top end of the market. And frankly, the investment required for a firm to have a capability to be an effective auditor of some of the largest companies is a substantial investment. And just as the case with most businesses, if you can't raise the money from outside capital, then you have to rely on the managers and current owners of the business to fund it. And that's a big ask for any business to fund all of its own expansion. Now, I guess the big argument against that is going to be that if you have external investors in an audit business, you're setting up potentially untold or unlimited conflicts of interest for that auditor going forward.
Well, possibly, but there are already rules in place to manage conflicts of interest. And in all walks of business life, there are conflicts of interest. For example, in drug manufacture, you've got the potential conflicts between patient safety and the profitability of your drug development. Now, we don't conclude that we can't have safe drugs just because the drugs are developed by profit-seeking organisations. And there are other examples from all sorts of walks of life. So we think the rules relating to management of conflicts of interest are adequate. And the key thing are the people signing the audit reports and taking responsibility for them independent of their clients.
Does that really support then the idea that I think Arthur Levitt has really floated, like that he would like to see some sort of return to audit-only firms?
Well, that's an interesting option. I think what we'd like to see is to make it possible for there to be a variety of different types of firms in the market. It's an open question as to whether an audit-only firm could be commercially successful, but it certainly would have some advantages in talking to potential clients, in being able to reassure them that it wouldn't have conflicts of interest because it only concentrated on audit, and that's one possible model.
And in your view, are there people out there outside the profession at the moment who even now take a view that they would be quite happy to invest in some way in an auditor?
Well, it's quite tricky to prove the case at the moment because the law in effect prevents it from happening. But if you think about the people who've got the greatest interest in the audit market being stable and competitive over the long term, it's essentially the long-term owners of equities, the long-term shareholders for the major institutions. And they've got the biggest amount to lose if the audit market became unsustainable. And frankly, the amounts of money that would be needed to invest in audit firms are trivial compared to the total amounts that those institutional investors invest in their underlying investments.
So could we see an institutional investor sign a cheque one day and help either grow an existing audit firm or maybe help establish a new one, a new entrant to the market?
Well, we'd like to create the possibility of that happening. Whether they choose to do it would be a commercial matter for them.
Okay.